I want to mention some more about the partner, capital T, capital P. Those of you with short memories, several weeks ago, I decided to use that term. The partner is that which everyone apparently is born with to some degree, the sensation that I have a partner, although it's not referred to as that. I can give you a crude spectrum analysis of it, that there are certainly, when you get into 4 dimensions at least, there are exceptions in places that there should not be, looked at from a 2D world. But going from those who are centered and driven by the lower circuits all the way to those driven by the higher circuits, that there is a shift in people at the lower ones, generally speaking, can feel the sensation of a partner less than others can. That it's like a modicum of internal talk, less than most of you people. Good old fat, beer drinking, hard working, hard fucking, hard sleeping, hard eating bricklayers. Speaking archetypically, if I may do so, and I don't see a reason why I should not. To jump to the other end of the spectrum, you could have a variation of it, again speaking in general. That the continuing feeling of a dichotomy inside can be less than it is with many other people. You get into the middle, speaking in general, and I would suggest to you that you could then find the examples that it would seem to be the strongest. That is rather parenthetical. I just couldn't resist throwing it in for some of you to pursue on your own. And don't take all that as being literal. It's a very crude sketching of it. Because everyone does feel as though there is a partner, even those that have a minimal amount of internal talk. They feel as though there's a partner every time they excuse themselves. They feel as though there is a partnership going on every time they have to explain their actions, every time that they are continually engaged in preparing their autobiography. Anytime you're speaking of yourself in general, that is an ordinary person, anytime that you are attempting to explain what you did, anytime under any guise that you are excusing yourself, at that time all people are unknowingly giving an account of this unrecognized partnership, that in this thing that seems to be me, there is me, and then there's this other guy. All right, that'll bring us up to date, right? Right. I want you to consider this, that in a sense, the partner is like a counterbalance to evolutionary growth. I did point out to you, and you should see it quite easily, that what I am calling the partner is a kind of sketching of things that are already referred to by ordinary humanity, such as the unconscious mind. It is what the religious people have referred to as one's baser self. It doesn't matter the terms, whether people are apparently referring to spirits, whether people are apparently referring to psychological traumas. All of life, to varying degrees, but all of life, the most feral of little communities at this time, have a variation of an acknowledgement of the partnership. If they are at the lowest, speaking horizontally, at the lowest cultural, civilized level on this planet right now, they believe at the very least in spirits, that spirits can overtake you. That is part of the job, and it keeps the shaman or the witch doctor in cigarettes. It's to advise people, it's to pray for them, it's to cast bones that in some way something happened and this man was not himself when he attempted to double date with a chicken. When he attacked his mother-in-law, he was not himself. So my little background is pointing out to you the idea of evil spirits, the idea of psychological traumas, etc., you should see a full range throughout history up until today, including today, that no matter what it is called, there is an unrecognized, unspecified, binarily analyzed at the most, realization that everybody seems to have somebody else with them. Now you notice at one level, you could say it's an excuse. It's even used today in modern society as an excuse legally that a man or a woman did not have the full use of their capacities. They did not have an instantaneous awareness of right from wrong, at least legally. They were insane. It is an excuse, stress, for just suddenly flashes of temper, of striking out at one's loved ones. But can you see beyond what could be made of apparent cultural analyzation, personal excuses, that it acts in a sense as a counterweight to the speed at which evolution is moving through man? Although it is used in a sense, we can take that view that I've just pointed out for you, it's very current, is always current in life, that it is a kind of excuse. It is a kind of explanation for untoward behavior, unexpected behavior from some person. That something overtook them. The stress was too much, the spirits overcame their better judgment, psychological traumas finally caught up with them in an unexpected moment. But beyond that, very crude view, can you see, speaking more in a biochemical sense, of how life has used that almost as a counterweight? You understand of being like a machine or being like a flywheel to keep a kind of equilibrium, that this machine of humanity, being life's expansion, moving, and moving at a nice clip. You only have my word for it because there's nothing to compare it to, unless you want to compare humanity's movements thus far compared to, say, a mountain range. But at any rate, it has been moving at a fair clip. And as I've also tried to point out to you or hint, it increases in speed. The partner is almost like a counterbalancing flywheel. No one gets anything from that? Right, the very sorts of things that psychologically, to use modern approaches, the things that seem to be a hindrance to humanity, the kinds of things against which reasonable people seem to struggle, that is, their childhood, their unconscious motivations, their unconscious hostilities, seeking analysis, taking drugs, drinking, doing something to change, without them knowing it, their current biochemical condition. They attribute it to, they look at it in such a way that what this is a hindrance. I would be a much better person. We would all be better. Those, let us say, that speak in favor of analysis. Those that you can find that will stand up and say, I went through 10 years of analysis and my life has changed. The whole world, everybody, would benefit if they would go through analysis, if they would find the right analyst, put themselves in his or her hands. Everybody would be better. Now, of course, the insinuation, it's not the reality, but the insinuation is, to some degree, I have killed the partner. I had unconscious, for instance, hatreds of my mother, and after 10 years of analysis, it finally came out. I cried and I screamed. And at the analyst's urging, I even called up my mother from his office and said, you know, to hell with you, you dirty old broad, and the way you treated me. And I cried and I said, oh, forgive me. And I feel much better. Parenthetically, I could also point out that, you know, you can hit the Assembly of God if you were the right person, and you can do that in 2 minutes at a savings of hundreds of thousands of dollars. But man is wired up to see the partner as being a deserving enemy, that if he could be eradicated, if he could be subdued at least, not only with me, but with everybody, what a wonderful world this would be. I submit to you, since it can't happen, but I submit to you, members of the jury, that such is not the case. If it could be done, which it cannot, if it could be done, you would then have, let us say, what had been a fairly decent running 3-liter, 6-cylinder, well-tuned automobile going along at the speed limit would be as though suddenly you had dropped in a gross of 12-cylinder Ferrari engines, and if it was possible to run an engine on this basis, almost do away with the flywheel and the camshaft, because I'm not using it in the real technical sense. But the power would absolutely shake the thing apart. And that's just in 3 dimensions. But do any of you begin to get any glimpse that the partner, in a sense, is a counterbalance? It is a stabilizer. Whereas for the few, of course, it is not an enemy, but it's irrelevant. It's a waste of time. You've got to rise above it. But as far as humanity, as far as the many continuing their belief, another example, of course, of the master stroke, that the partner, the evil side of me, the uncontrollable side of me, the side of me that is unpredictable, the side of me that, at least if I don't disapprove of, many others do, which of course is not the real me. Because whenever I'm acting that way, you must trust me, my friends, I am simply not at my best. That was not me that acted that way the last time I was at your house. It was not me that struck out and screamed at my children when you saw me over at the PTA meeting. I mean, I could tell you what brought it on. I don't want to bore you with it. It had been a very difficult week. It simply was not me. But this belief, whether the individuals enunciate it specifically or not, you should all be able to feel it with no problem, that there is in humanity, all the way back as far as history goes, when it was simply put in religious terms, that there is something in man that needs to be overcome. Anywhere from suppressed to eradicated, and that something is this unrecognized partnership. But the partnership cannot be severed in the many. It is not even to be suppressed. The partnership is a stabilizer. It is a counterbalance. It is like a counterweight to a moving piece of Vitas Machina. If you could eradicate the partner in people, we would all have to run to the hills. I would not want to be here, and I assure you that you would not want to be here. Something else. Notice this, through whatever terms that the examples I have pulled out for you of evil spirits, psychological traumas, the unconscious mind, the unconscious self, without a triaxial, without an unnatural view of it, people are wired up to think of the partner, not having to use my term, of course, but to think of their other side, their undesirable aspect, as being a singularity. In other words, if they took my term, if they heard me use it, and I said everyone has a partner, the partner, that sounds right. But you have had enough occasions, if not on your own through the several tasks I have given, that the partner is not one. Now, there's several ways I haven't decided that struck me to describe it. And since I hate decisions, puts me into a great amount of stress, I'll give you both of them. That the partner is a mimic and can speak in a multitude of voices, or it is not a partner that's in you. You've been misled. He has very close relatives, and they all look like they're a bunch, almost, of identical twins. Identical septuplets. The whole family, even some of them are not even siblings, that it's aunts and uncles, They almost all look alike. And yet everyone treats, if you'll note, again, through whatever terms they think of it as being an unconscious self, a baser, instinctive side to their personality. Without any analyzation, if you stressed it to someone and said, well, is it like another person? You might get them to say, yeah. You know, I guess if you put it that way, it's like there is another person in me at times. You mean, now, like another person? And they go, yeah. And you say, well, I think, am I describing it correctly? Not trying to put words in your mouth. And people would say, yeah, it's like another person. And it's very tricky. And I don't bring this up just to show that it can be observed in a different way, because there is a very practical aspect to this. Because then, insofar as life allows ordinary people to try to deal with this, their feeling and their thought, as witnessed by the way it's described and written about, treats the partner as a partner, a one. I mean, he may have several bad habits, like he gets mad sometimes, but he's also the one that is inclined to get drunk. I mean, it's the same guy. Because I normally get mad if I've been drinking. He's also the kind that'll go out and try to pick up somebody, a stranger on the street, and have sex. It's like he's one guy, and he's got two or three, perhaps real questionable attributes. But I'm suggesting you most strongly from a practical viewpoint, which I perhaps will go into at some other time, but you ought to be able to follow some of this. There is a practical use of looking at it on the basis that the partner is not actually one. It's like a whole family. They're very related. And they almost, as I said, even if they were not really siblings, you can almost see an aunt and a nephew, and I'll be damned, once you get a look at them, that there is a family resemblance that's astounding. It passes all questions of gender, age, that the partner's aunt looks a whole lot like the partner's nephew, and the partner's niece looks a whole lot like the partner's uncle, and the partner's sister looks a whole lot like him. Back to something I mentioned last week when I was giving you a kind of test that you could impose upon yourself as to whether I am making any progress in this great struggle. And that is, could you see that two of the funniest things in the world that cannot be seen correctly at line level consciousness? I could say it to ordinary people and they'd hear what I said, they thought, and laugh. But they'd be laughing at somebody else. And that was, can you see that there's nothing funnier than people seriously posing and grown people seriously complaining? Now, if I said that under some guise to an ordinary group of people, and I had given a few jokes and had everybody went over to my side, they were enjoying it, let's assume that everybody in the world would say, yeah, and they have pictures, as I did of someone last week of doing those kind of real pseudo. Pick up any good, especially women's magazines. I hate to pick on them, because nowadays you can pick up men's magazines. The ads, it's easy enough to laugh at them. It's easy enough to laugh. Entertainers, famous people that know that they're in the midst of a photo opportunity. And they're shaking hands with somebody, but they know where the camera is. They know where their best side is. All right. I gave you that last week, but let me point out to you that that is not the only kind of posing. It is not just what an ordinarily wired-up cynic might think that I was referring to, such as examples I just went through again. There can be posing that would apparently be far removed from the pages of Vogue or Esquire or Playboy or Vanity Fair or the president in the midst of a photo opportunity. How about into the realm that would seem far removed from that? Seem far removed. That is the wonderful world of religion, mysticism, spiritual activity. All right, serious posing, I just wanted to expand what some of you probably thought you heard last week and just let it drop. I can also describe as a kind of serious posing with no understanding of the passion that is being attempted, such as photographs of religious leaders. I'll have to jump back on the Pope since he's the easiest example. Let me throw in a few more. How about followers of up-to-date gurus somewhere? People giving gestures. The Pope constantly in a pose. Parenthetically, let me point out again, there is not a universal difference between that and photographs of a NATO general, those in the armed forces. Maybe I'll leave that, or maybe I'll come back. Apparently, you would see somebody doing something religious. Back to the Pope, and all of you by now understand that I'm not picking on the Pope. He's just the best known target. He just exemplifies it in lesser known areas. But there is a photograph wherever he is, and he is always on. Well, of course, you would expect no less. You don't expect to see the Pope, come out of an airplane to visit people and make, these fine gestures, and he bows. You don't expect later for him to get through and you see him pull off his hat and, do a little step. Nobody does. Not those that would laugh at the Catholic Church, and not those that would be sincere followers. So, to say that he is always on is to say that, at least in one respect, at least he is fulfilling the minimal requirements for being Pope. That you do not skip, you don't stay on your head. If somebody in the crowd shouts out, the Pope don't go. But more than just that, if you notice, his hands, his face, his gestures is a constant pose. Military leaders, those that get anywhere, are constantly posing. The repertoire is somewhat more limited perhaps than the Pope, but they are constantly posing. World leaders are constantly posing. You just turn on television any time. See, there's a great summit meeting between the leaders of America and Mother Russia. And as long as the cameras are on, as long as they've got any sensation of their own, these world leaders, don't ask me where they go to school, but there's a certain limited repertoire. Well, of course, I can tell you where they go to school in life. But there is a repertoire, very limited, of how they walk, where their hands are. You do not see world leaders standing around where they're talking to each other out in public. They don't do that. They don't do that. And if you'll notice their hands throughout the world, when they walk along, that they're walking along coming out of a meeting, the cameras are on and they're smiling at each other and the cameras, that they do certain things with their hands. They don't stick their hands in their pockets. It is a posing. And what I was trying to get you to see, the basis of it, not that the individuals have any knowledge of this, but the basis of it is the attempt to project and to pass on the appearance of some passion, whether it be friendliness, openness, seriousness, godliness, thoughtfulness. It is a posing. Life is making them do it, but what is involved is a very low-level attempt with no understanding. Is what I'm pointing out to you people, is the danger of it to you people. With no understanding of the passion attempted. That is, that life is attempting to pass between one person and another, or in a lot of these cases, the examples I'm using for you is one person. That is, the entertainer and the audience. One person and many people. The Pope, a rabbi, a Billy Graham, somebody that's talking, and they do poses, and they ask him a question, what do you think of the lack of religious freedom and such, and a man and all the pose is to show a person, it just comes through. It'll change, I know, somewhat from one culture to another. But there will be an apropos range of poses. The Pope, a rabbi, a Protestant minister will do. Now, if you're ordinary, it would fit in. You wouldn't be there. You're wired up to be there in that temple, in that synagogue, that church. And here is apparently your leader of some religion. And they ask him, what do you think can be done about world peace? And there are poses. But if you're sitting there, if you're wired up and you're a part of that whole magnetic scheme, it's right. That's why you know that the man's not suddenly going to put on a nose and glasses. He's not. That is, life won't allow it. They can't. It just won't work. But so you expect what does happen. But there is a series of poses. Well, let's get over that. Imagine you're there and they're asking him about world peace, world hunger. And he goes. But when you're sitting there, it's right. It's a part of the drama in which you are involved. You're, albeit the audience, and seem to be passive, but there is an exchange of energy and heat, general information. In him doing this, he pauses, and he says, world hunger. And it's all right. The whole drama is just right. You're sitting there, and if suddenly I jumped out of the bushes and said, how do you like it? How's it going? You'd say, fine. I mean, that's my kind of guy. And you would try to, I said, well, why? You said, well, look, you can just feel the love. You can feel the compassion that he has. He's pondering. It's not an easy question. It's not something he can just answer. Look at what he's doing. Always remember that the man is not involved with any kind of subterfuge. There is no game going on. He is not laughing up his sleeve. Whoever he is, he would not be there. He cannot put on nose and glasses. What he is doing, to him, he's as caught up as you are, is the attempt to convey a kind of passion, to be a part of it. But that is serious posing. That is, the person involved has no understanding of it. It is proper for life, but it is not proper for someone involved with this. It by no means is limited to generals, popes, and rabbis, politicians. All of you should know by now that you pose, or if you like, your partner has led you into posing. At line level, everyone is caught up in posing. Seriously. But you walk in a singles bar, you've dressed up and you've done your best, you already posed at home. You got in the mirror and you try to get everything just right, and you change shirts once or twice or dresses once or twice. You got supposedly right, and you get in. You try to see who's in the place before you walk in, make sure that you're not too early, not too late, there's enough people there. Look around that you're not going to trip. Straighten your tie, straighten your hair. You walk in and you walk to the bar, or you sit at the bar if you're a woman, but there's a certain kind of pose. And you look around, and the bartender asks what you like, and it's so-and-so. It is serious posing. If I must give you some hint at a quantitative difference, I will hint to you that quantitatively there is more to be struggled against when it seems to be in realms higher than, let's say, good old sex, which is basically what I'm talking about, to go into the bar and do the posing. It's almost impossible to lay or get laid without posing. Even peacocks and dogs and frogs and terns pose. But when it gets into serious spiritual problems, That even if you don't have an overt audience at the time, that there you sit listening to television, and they bring up some terrible calamity that's happened, and they show dead families and children. And apparently it's just you and the zenith there in a room by yourself, and you begin to pose. And they bring out a priest that just barely survived this great calamity that befell a village. And he's crying. He's talking about the numbers of families, mothers and children that were killed. And you sit there alone and you begin to fall into serious posing. Some of you may notice I've spent all this time apparently just talking about physical posing. I don't assume that any of you, now that I bring it out, think it's going to stop there. But back to the easily observable. And you're sitting there alone and you pose. This is not simply, although I pointed out to you, since some of you would have your partner stumble across it, it seems to change from culture to culture, but this does not change. Whether the pose, let's say, of great piety in one culture was to do this, just to make it crude, and another one, it was to do this. Whatever it is in that culture, it is creating, remember this, a biochemical alteration in the person. It is not doing this, and in some way you're plugging into God's Holy Spirit, that every time you do this, it does seem, let's say to you, and where you are, that you can do this under certain conditions, hearing bad news, feeling sorry for yourself, anything that resembles, quote, a spiritual situation, that you can do this and you can feel differently. It happens all over the world. I'm telling you what is happening is this is tied up with an absolute biochemical change. It is not different from you taking a drink in the first drink there in the bar. Suddenly you look around the room and think, God damn, it's all right to be alive. You know, people are okay. You look around, and everybody in there is fairly early. It's just a dozen or so people. Not even any women yet. A bunch of guys, and normally you're kind of on edge around strangers, and you have one drink. Maybe you're working on the second one. Bring me a double. And you suddenly look around this little place, and just people look at you, and you suddenly go, hi. Smile at strangers, and a feeling of, you know, life ain't that bad. I get all tight in the rat race during the day, and I feel like I'm competing with everybody else, but the rest of these bastards are all right. Life's all right. Hey, have a drink on me. There is no difference between that and doing this and literally feeling different. This is not a sham. There are people that say, I can sit down in the lotus position and I can go, in a few minutes I feel peaceful. That is not a lie. But there is no difference between that and having a drink. Because what you are doing is affecting the biochemical balance in your whole nervous system, the awareness springing here. The projector and the screen shifts. Picture gets a little brighter, the colors get better. The sound goes up, the sound goes down. They slow the film down a little bit, they speed the film up a little bit. It's the same thing has occurred. But no one up until now has ever had any knowledge of this. And I dare say that it's very likely I'll die before many people have much knowledge. It's just seeping out all over the place now. You cannot, the few people, you cannot continue to fall into serious posing. And especially, as I was trying to suggest to you, the quantitative danger, if you will, yes I will, is that, all right, maybe some kind of posing. Maybe me always trying to walk in a bar and when I see a good-looking woman, you know, my nose is bent this way, so I always try to turn this way because I've checked enough mirrors. I got wraparound mirrors at home. I spent hours, and I look a little better from this direction when you first, you know, see me. All right. There is a quantitative difference between that, qualitative difference between that and that which seems to be beyond any question, especially beyond any attack, that there's poses I go into. Which you understand, just doing this, many people pray. Muslims, Christians is a big thing of the physical praying, of getting down on a knee, getting down on both knees and putting your head down. just taking up a position, meditation. It is not what it appears to be, as you should know by now. But it is not some kind of imagination. It is not people sitting around. It's not the case that there are people sitting around in the lotus position or the Brutus position and got their hands in a certain way, or they're on their knees and they're praying and they're apparently chanting something. They're apparently praising the gods and the spirits. It is not that those people are engaged in some kind of, quote, imagination, since I told you that imagination is people's imagination. There is either no such thing as imagination, which is, as I told you, or calling imagination imagination is bunk. I explained this to you several times, so we won't go into that. Something is occurring. That what is taking place, and part of it is tied up. It is not simply the posing is causing it, but it is tied up with it in the posing to an ordinary person, that this is in part a cause of my better feeling. But they don't understand the cause. They attribute the cause to, well, this is based upon the teachings of Swami so-and-so. This is based upon, my religious leader said that God intended us to pray in this manner, to worship him in this manner, and when I do it, I do feel better. I mean, most of the time, if I can keep it up for a little while, I feel better. They're telling the truth. But people have a drink and they feel better. People have one toke, 2 or 3, and they feel better. There is no difference. Their state, their biochemical state has been altered. Serious posing to a few people, once you get a glimpse of it, is a serious problem. And then once you really see it, it is one of the 2 major funny, with no hostility, real funny things, in the sense that I sort of gave you a throwaway line last week about, it's not funny ha-ha at somebody. It's not even ordinarily funny. It's funny on the basis that life is still using this on such a wide range, and I see it so clearly. You know, it looks like things will speed up. I mean, just for me. Good grief, give me a break. It's funny in a real pleasant, warm puppy sense. A little something more on a little something I mentioned also last week. To be part of life's regular team. You know what I mean, to be a regular person, to be an ordinary person. You have got to be continually working on your autobiography. And let me ask you this in my rhetorical way. That is back to that kind of nonverbal question that most of you should be able to get some ephemeral grasp of now and then, of me asking you what is going on. But remember, that's not a linear question. Something wrong? And it's not a 3-dimensional question. It's certainly not a 2-dimensional, it's named a 3-dimensional, and there is no answer. And once you know what it is, forget the words I put it on, because that's not the question, it's what's going on. Because, see, that's the kind of thing that's already ordinarily known. That is, the words and the idea apparently involved with the question, which will stand in front of and bar any additional knowing. So once you know what it is, it's out in the same area of the state as neuralizing. So you got to find your own way that you can ask that question, but you don't even say the words. It's what is possibly going on here? How is life using this? And you can't get anywhere with any answer that comes to you. That is, any answer that your partner brings up. Forget it. So, what I was getting to was one area that I could point out. A very common occurrence, at least today when access to the media or vanity printing and publishing is so available, that there are so many talk shows and interview shows on every radio and television station in the smallest of cities, it seems, in this part of the world, that there's no shortage of people who have written their autobiography. But I wanted to narrow it down, take it off on a little side road. This is very common nowadays, that you'll have someone who is apparently just almost devoid of any general interest. I'm tempted to make up examples, but then if people heard this years from now, the examples might not hold true. An entertainer that is almost a living, walking example of enriched white bread. A person that seems to be totally innocuous. A person that just seems to be a walking Cupid doll. That sort of thing. I guess people at later times, there'll be examples, you'll have to fill them in. In this day and time, I could point out, we could say, Donnie and Marie Osborne, John Denver, the Lennon sisters, Lawrence Welk, just somebody in the public eye that you might like what they did. You heard a song or two, but your general feeling is they have got to be the most bland, most uninteresting person in the world. And yet they will insist on writing their autobiography, and this comes out. This is the general prologue, that is, once they begin to speak about it, be interviewed or say some comment to a book reviewer, that many, 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 many times they will say, I seem to have this image with the public of being sort of a walking bottle of vanilla extract. People seem to think that I have just lived some kind of charmed life, like I'm a lollipop, I just came from nowhere, and I got a beautiful voice, or whatever their talent is, and that I smile, and they just think I live an idyllic life. No. Hold up the book. That's why I wrote the book, Interviewer So-and-so, because it's time the world knew I'm not at all like that. I am not uninteresting, and I have suffered. Of course, very often I'm pulling out somewhat an extreme example, but between that and the other end of a two-dimensional spectrum is a place to ask yourself non-verbally, what is going on? Now, I've already pointed out to you in many ways, this is a variation of it, I was trying to refine your investigation of it, that everybody is engaged in a form of subtle suicide by describing themselves. Now, I've also pointed out, you should know this, it seems like almost every third person, at least in this country, has written their autobiography, and it's about to be published. If you do not believe that, get one of these, get on the mailing list of one of these discount book places that send out every month or so a 50-page tabloid size of cut-out books. And it's astounding, saying that casually. If any of you don't know, it's astounding. They'll have everything from the autobiography of Lord Mountbatten that was published at $39.95 down to $14.95, all the way from that to a plethora of autobiographies of people, plus they'll give you a little blurb, but of autobiographies of people you never heard of. And oftentimes they'll give the publisher, publishing houses you've heard of, and it will give the price, published at $14.95. Somewhere in the last few years, marked down 99 cents. But it'll give the blurb. It'll say, autobiography recounting the ups and downs and the hardships of a young girl growing up in the Midwest determined to become a famous Hollywood fashion designer, and how drugs and unbridled sex almost cost her her dream. Originally published, $14.95, 99 cents. All right, that's enough laughter, because everybody's partner is continually working on that damn autobiography. And to be a regular guy and gal on life's ordinary team, you're continually working on that bastard. Whether you ever get it published, whether you ever write it down, is of no particular consequence. It's between you and the partner, if you're only living at line level. There is a continual, daily, constant working / planning on that autobiography. I just wanted to ask you again from last week, in a slightly different way, again non-verbally, what possibly is going on? I might hint to you where I started out tonight about being able to see the partner as being a kind of stabilizer, a kind of counterbalance to the speed, the temperature and the tempo at which life's evolutionary growth through man operates. And after all this laughter, you people on tape can always hear this from the audience. You know, this is not laughter at a bunch of bozos in some way writing their autobiography that no one wants to read, and 2 weeks after it's published, the publisher is going to go, oh my God, and finally see the light and realize not only is nobody going to pay $14.95 for the biography of this woman, we'll be lucky if we can unload the son of a bitch to some cutout place for 79 cents. You know, who is it that signed the contract on this? Heads are going to roll. We're not laughing at that, because everybody on this planet, except the few, and in you it's still going on, everyone is writing continually, working on or planning. Same thing, their autobiography. Of course, under ordinary conditions, ordinary people are not just covertly working and planning on it. It is that subtle suicide, from our viewpoint, from your viewpoint, that I am killing myself by this continual self-confession. And yet it is a stabilizer. It is a counterbalance. Could anyone be interesting if they had not suffered? What if you decided to write your autobiography? Take all this I'm going to do as always, oft times, back and forth from the literal to the allegorical and then some. And I reserve the right, every other word, to shift back and forth. What if you decided to write one and you had enough of a letter of inquiry, a proposal that you sent to a publisher describing who you are, how great you are, even though they may not have heard of you, what an interesting life you've had, and how people be, you know, you give enough sales pitch that they write you back and say, all right, send us, you know, the first 5 chapters and we'll look at it, which is a big deal to even get a major publishing house that instant. But let's say that you wrote them just a descriptive letter, and they said, all right, some assistant editor says, send it in. Let us say that you went ahead and knock out the whole thing, send the complete thing, and in it was not one iota of how you had suffered. Now, if this could be done, follow me right quick, I'm going to leave it for you for a few seconds, and you had led, in one aspect, from one viewpoint, a rather interesting life, if you could live an interesting life without suffering, and all you related was, here's the interesting things I have done that have happened to me, and there was no confession of suffering. There were no ups and downs. Would they contract your book? I'll give you a few seconds. Would you sit and listen to someone? If you were at a cocktail party and someone said, do you know who that is that just walked in, that's staying over there by the fern? That little short fern, not the big one, the little short fern, the guy with the beard. Do you know who that is? And they tell you who it is, and it's somebody, let's say, that you've heard of in some field in which you think you're interested. And you go, ooh, ah, and you get over and you find him or her and you corner them a minute and you take them over a drink and you try to talk to them for a little while. Again, I'm stretching justice by the neck. But let us say the person would stand there and they talk to you a little bit. Let's say that you could talk 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 minutes and you've covered all of how you like what they did and you've heard of them. They go, yeah. And then you start trying to talk to them. Well, what are you up to now? Or did you get over the last thing that happened that I heard about? And you talked, and they did not give you any real self-confession. No recount of any suffering. Well, that last expedition, you did hear I got frostbite and I had to cough through my toes. None of that. Or you did hear my last symphony that we put on. The whole crowd walked out. They didn't even like it enough to boo. These people they left. What would you think of this erstwhile hero? Would you stand there and listen to it 7 or 8 minutes if you were ordinary, if they engaged in no real self-confession? Is it possible to be interesting when you have no tale of suffering? How about even worse? Not only can the unsuffering, the question, can the unsuffering be truly interesting? Could the unsuffering even be useful? What would you do with somebody that had not suffered? Well, at least they would say they did. They don't have to. All you got to do is say you did. Which is a little what I was trying to hint about the rather bland people that just came out of nowhere and had a hit record when they were 13, and their whole family, everybody looks like it was the Beaver and the Cleaver family, that they all stood up and smiled, and they all had a house, and they all had a car, and they all had a college education, and they all drank milk. And the person finally writes their autobiography at the old age of 19, wanting the public to know, you people think I just grew up with a silver spoon in my mouth and silver jockey shorts on. Will you hear the real truth about my story? Can those who do not suffer not only be interesting, but can they even be useful? All of you by now should be able to play range on the home. That's home on the range turned, if you know how, in at least 3 different directions, to go from examples I pull out, such as showbiz, as mainly what I was talking about now, the arts, go into the political realm, go into the religious realm. Is there any figure, of course dead's easy to pinpoint, but imagine they were alive. Think of some who are now alive. Think of some that you don't even know about, just make up, let your partner make up. What would be a real guru? You know, if I could do better than you, if I could find a real one like my partner dreams of. All the way from that to examples of people now alive that you've heard about or met, to those dead and gone. What is their story if you take away suffering? Well, for one thing, Christianity is shot to hell. Judaism would be little more than a passing travel log. Buddha, he'd been the kind of guy like Donny Osmond, having to say, hey, one day I just was sitting here on a tree and I went, hey, I understand everything. And it just happened. I was just out having fun, picking some berries. And what is it without suffering? Political leaders, world leaders, those who take power through apparent free elections, those who seize it from the barrel of a gun, anybody that seems to be interesting, anybody that seems to be making or has made an impact on horizontal history, if you took away their suffering, who the hell would read their story? Who would remember them? Who would want to talk to them? I ask you again, is it possible not only for the non-suffering to be interesting, but could they even be useful? There is a third one. Could they even exist? Speaking of religious people, can any of you picture this? We have a religious person, a Swami, a Guru, at some time, way back then, right now. And he confides if not complains, if not proclaims, I am surrounded by fear, indecision, and stupidity. Now, in a sense, you could look at that externally and find, in any given occasion, from some viewpoint, you could find a great deal of apparent reality to that. Can any of you turn that internally to where you would have perhaps someone that would qualify as a apparent temporary leader to realize I am surrounded, not looking out here, I am surrounded by fear, indecision, and stupidity. Might I also note for you, if I must back up, all the great known religious stories, all these leaders that apparently started a religion of some kind. There's somewhere in the holy books, I'm not going to try to remember because some of this I'm going to have to make up anyway, which doesn't matter, that there is a story somewhere of all of them turning around and looking at the people that they claim, I went through this trouble, suffered, I might add, for you people, what I've gone through, and I look around and I'm surrounded by fear, indecision, and downright stupidity. It's there in every holy story. It's there in just all forms of mythology. Now, as always, forget looking out somewhere else externally. Can any of you see inside that there is a voice that arises, and oftentimes arises under the unanalyzed guise of being an exceptional voice within you? Real insight, I am growing in some kind of metaphysical way, but I'll be damned if through this partner and his relatives, I'm surrounded by fear and indecision and stupidity, among other things. But it ain't me. Of course, looking back externally, which I was about to stop, but I can't resist this. Ordinary people are not wired up to understand that people do not dance at the end of a barrel of a gun. I knew I couldn't leave it at that. For someone who is an apparent leader, it does not have to be just religious. I just use that as a kind of crushing example to most people, or poignant example, a piercing example, that the apparent leader, the apparent entertainer, says, my audience, my following, strikes me is composed primarily of those who are fearful, indecisive, and stupid. What an unjust thing. They do not realize that neither the audience nor especially the leader was brought there, look at externally, at the end of a gun barrel with a knife through their throat and saying, all right, all of you people and him dance. I couldn't resist throwing that in. The tape's about to run out. I ask you again, can any of you see that that same circumstance, as always, occurs internally? And it's always, even though perhaps not named, those dumb relatives and the partner and the relatives, the stupidity and the indecision and their fearful attitude is just going to be the death of me. How about this one? Since I get a general impression that many of you, back in your more childish days, were interested in science fiction writing. Do you understand? Can you look back now and realize that science fiction writers cannot adequately concoct a, quote, superior being, superior man, genetic generically speaking. I can't pull out any great examples since I don't read science fiction, but knowing what it is and seeing some movies, it's not an excuse. I just can't come up with any examples. So those of you who do know can follow it, and those of you who don't, if you've never read any, you've seen as many movies and television shows as me. Therefore, we can all discuss it. They cannot come up where they cannot produce a superior person. Where they, and I pick out science fiction as an extension of religion. Of the stories that suddenly this flying saucer comes down. A man, a person from a superior civilization is here, is suddenly amongst us. Or the whole scenario is set thousands of years in the future where everyone has now evolved and are superior to the present reader. They cannot concoct a superior person. Now peruse that. They concoct behavior. And I might add, as always, they concoct behavior primarily in three different areas that you might find off on your own spare time to be somewhat connected with my three-storied factory in which we all toil so faithfully and without a union. They concoct superior people, superior men, let us say at the Red Circuit level, that do things such as they can transpose themselves, turn themselves into some kind of antimatter and suddenly appear somewhere else. Variation of flying through the air, flying carpet, riding on the backs of angels, walking on the water. They can concoct people who are sans hostility. The prophets here from other times and other places to tell us, woe you people, we built this flying saucer at a tremendous expense, sans hostility. The prophets here from other times and other places to tell us, woe you people, we built this flying saucer at a tremendous expense, took us years to get the contracts let out in our planet, had to fly here, I had to leave my family. Suffice it to say, we went to a lot of trouble to come down here and see you people. We've had our eye on you, and we're here with an important message. Of course, I guess I'm about to wear this joke out with you people. And the message is, I can hardly wait, is you got to quit fighting. You flew 200 million light years and gave up your family and spent millions of dollars to get here. Hey, we've been hearing this. You don't have to come from there. We hear it every day. At any rate, you might see that as being somewhere within the area that ordinary people refer to as the emotions. That the people in some way are superior because they smile and say, where I come from, we don't have wars. Of course, then some hothead from Brooklyn shoots him before it's over. And he always looks real surprised, like, what? But they were superior enough to fly 50 million 100 light years to build this thing and get here. They've been watching us and everything that's going on, and suddenly this mad, out-of-work grocer from Brooklyn shoots him, and he goes through Hollywood, a concocted pose to apparently bring on some kind of a passion from the audience, that his look is just, there's your superior person. I never expected this would happen. If we move, let us say, in the general vicinity of the yellow circuit, then they concoct behavior that the people know everything. That is, they land, and our scientists rush out, our military complex folks rush out and say, good grief, this thing flew all the way from Alpha Centauri. And he said, yeah. How do you do that? And the guy said, well, hey, that's no problem. Give him the back of a matchbook and a pen. They know everything. They have concocted new materials unknown to us. They can send their thoughts from one another without any kind of mechanical support systems. They can decompose themselves and reappear somewhere else. They know, as my great uncle used to say, they know just all kinds of shit. They know all kinds of crap that we never thought about. What I was getting at, I'll go back and pretend we're still talking for the time being about science fiction writers. Those people that life have produced and speak through that seem to be talking about the future, or they're talking about the future transposed here, like from other universes, other worlds, other solar systems brought here, and they are, quote, superior, more evolved peoples. All they can do is describe, in those three general areas that I point out, as you should suspect, superior, that is, behavior of which we're incapable. But they cannot describe in some way, they can't even begin to describe internally how somebody would be superior. Now please note, forget science fiction writers here in late 1985. Go back as far as history has been recorded, the Greeks in this part of the world attempting to describe their gods. Any religion. The regular players of the team, ordinary people, cannot concoct a superior man. It's mathematically impossible. And they continually try. And things are wired up in such a way that there is always an audience. Whether you continue to read, you and your partner, religious tomes, or whether you read science fiction, there is this continuing story of which you respond in some way to superior people. But the audience never realizes, because they can't, you can just barely hear what I'm saying, it is mathematically impossible for them to concoct a truly superior person. That here is somebody from a civilization that's evolving, but they are 10 billion years beyond us. What we are now, they are 10 billion years beyond. It's what we will be 10 billion years from now. Imagine what those people would be. And there the man is with a typewriter and his little free brain and blank paper, a contract rating, his latest book. Do anything. Creatures that far away, God knows. I mean, the public will accept anything I can come up with. So here I go. I'll let my imagination just go wild. What would it be? A person that would be that far evolved. All right, first off, let's see. He could fly through the air. I mean, people could shoot him, and it wouldn't hurt him. I mean, even people from Brooklyn could shoot him, and he wouldn't die. People would get mad at him, and he would just smile and go. And he would know as much as every book in Harvard and Princeton and the University of Alabama. And from now on out, it's just going to be variations. He can go without sleep. He can climb the tallest mountains from the deepest oceans. People can give him any problem that we've been working on. Technology, theoretical physics, he can answer it. And he won't charge you. He's not greedy. He doesn't want anything. Sort of aside, I always notice, I'm aware of this. You might find this curious. Put this in strictly parentheses. I just couldn't resist throwing it in. It seems very common that these superior creatures that I pick up pieces of from science fiction seem to be beyond sex. I get that general awareness of what's going on. I thought you might find that interesting if you'd never thought about it. In case you're glad you're not superior. Well, I'm not going to say really anything more specific. I was going to leave this because humanity, just nobody ever recognizes this. You think you have read stories, and it does not have to be just science fiction. I'm aware of that. In prior decades before the genre of science fiction, there have been books considered classic or less than classic about superior creatures, superior men that suddenly came out of a hole in the ground, and that lost continent of Atlantis suddenly sprang back up off the shores of San Diego. There are these superior people. Literature is replete with these. Of course, it is the backbone of religious writings. But you should be able now to hear me that they have never in any real way described a truly superior man. They describe somebody that has abilities in the red, the blue, and the yellow circuit, observable behavior in those circuits, manifests of those circuits. They can do things faster, quicker, through lead, around corners, without sleep, at no charge, open 24 hours a day. But they're extensions of what humanity can already do. That is, the person writing, his time and place. But nobody's ever analyzed that is taken as being an absolute proof of a superior condition. It's not simply that this guy can go boom and shoot bullets, 45s out of his finger at somebody that fucks with him, or that you can ask him a question now to which there seems to be no answer in theoretical physics, and he goes, oh, blah, 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 blah. There is no attempt whatsoever to give some accounting of what is this a reflection of. This creature that I have made up, this fictional character from 10 billion years in our future, I have made up can do things that's beyond any question, beyond any possibility of us doing. There is no attempt to say, all right, that's his overt behavior. That's what I can observe. That's what I'm describing. How can I describe internally what's going on with him? How can I describe internally what's going on with a Buddha, a Moses, a Jesus, Swami X? Nobody's ever thought to try. Oh, they'll say things, well, the Spirit was with him. God made him do it. Or this man came here in the space capsule and he's superior, but hell, he's 10 million years older. He and his civilization we are, in the case. He just is. Nobody attempts it because nobody can do it. Since nobody can do it, nobody even thinks about it. The audience never thinks about it. It's enough to read, hey, this guy, when it gets too hot for him, when he gets tired of talking, he touches his nose like this and goes, and he disintegrates. Like, who is it? Scotty, beam me here, beam me there. They just kind of go boom, and they disappear, and he can be over there. Hey, is that superior enough? I'll take it. Or he can turn around to people, reporters, people trying to question him here, and he reads minds. He turns around to somebody that's about to ask a question, he answers it before they ask it. Or somebody asks a question, and he says, that's not the question you meant. What you really wanted to ask me was such and such. Everybody will accept behavior, but there is no attempt, because it cannot be done for an ordinary person to describe a superior man. End of paragraph. Has anyone ever noticed this? That religion in all forms, mystical, attempted mystical systems, cults, your own partner, but to throw it all under the verbal umbrella of religion, always talks of a new man, or / mind, being revealed. The moments of epiphany, whether it seemed to come through spirits in some other time and place, or whether it seemed to come through a combination of drugs and New Age thought, that they speak of this new condition, the new man, my new mind, my new state of consciousness. It is always, whatever word they use, get yourself a synonym finder and you will see, it is always synonymous with it was revealed. But may I note for you that there is nothing hidden or suppressed in man as he is, whether it be now or whether it have been 6,000 years ago. And yet the feeling, things that you had read before you got here, things that you thought had some bearing on this, that you thought I was related to the teachings of Sufis or a Gurdjieff or some New Age thinker, it's somewhere you and your partner had already accepted, not through stupidity, things are wired up that way, that the secret, some method, some piece of secret knowledge, in some way would bring about a revelation within you wherein you would become anew. That this knowledge, this method, this trick, this chant would produce a new me. But this whole thing in some way would be revealed. And at the very least, the unstated part is there is something within man that is being suppressed. And many of these offshoots of life's attempted growth, it has been a cry on several parts of this planet that in some way man was asleep, and that through certain kinds of methods, through the graces of the spirits, he could be taken from this bad state and be revealed to him that he's been walking around blind, and his eyes could be open, and it would be revealed. And to say the very least, that's an unbecoming description. It's extremely ill-conceived. I'm speaking at the very least, being charitable. Because the inference is, and not through some mistake on humanity, because I'm going to end up, of course, as you should know, asking you what is being used by life in this manner. That something has been suppressed. There's some goodness in man. This original goodness, this original state of superior being, of consciousness, that has been suppressed through sinning against the gods, through going against his natural inclinations, through pissing on the planet, through living an unnatural life, through ignoring astrology, through just being a general bad boy, that he has fallen from grace, that there was some condition that at one time overtly extant in man, or at least a living potential, and now it has been suppressed. It has been covered up by all these dastardly deeds. It has been covered up by man going astray. And this superior state, should it come about, would be through a process of revelation. And that is, for a few people, that is an extremely poor description of it. Because as everyone is, there is nothing being hidden. You've got to have absolutely no consciousness above your line wherever you are. None. Because if you had any, you know that this facade, it amounts to that. And that's a three-dimensional description. And what seems to be an individual person is such a fragile, such an ephemeral, such a shallow thing, to say that there is something else behind it. It vibrates, it feels correctly. Many people throughout the planet at all times. Here, read that story, that there is something, there is a kernel, there is a spark of the original fire of the gods in you. But through you going against God's will, through you going against the great cosmic laws. It is as though someone has put a blanket over the flame, and it's just kind of smoldering now. But if you'd do right, the blanket would be pulled off, and there you'd be. Anyone who believes that, anyone who goes along with the vibrations that you would not improperly feel at line level consciousness in relationship to those stories, but anyone who still vibrates to that is a sack case. You're completely without any understanding of what this is. Not just what I say, of what this is. You have no knowledge of what you are and what humanity is. To think there's something hidden behind me in my dreams, behind me in my fear. I'm speaking at line level now. Me and my hesitation, me and my good thoughts, me and my terrible thoughts, me and my charitable feelings, me and my hostile feelings. Behind all of this great potpourri, this great volcanic eruption that I think of as being myself, warts and all, behind this great whirlpool of contradictory emotions, behind all this fear and suffering, I feel it when I read about it, when I hear about it, when I dream about it, that there is something in me. There is something in me that could be revealed, and it would come out as a blinding flash of holy, cosmic. I'll be a new person, and it's just waiting there to be revealed. There ain't a damn thing waiting there. There's nothing behind that. That is it. That is the person, just as they should be. It's no theory. That's why I can't go out and preach about it in some way. That's why I can't write about it in some direct way and suddenly sell millions of books. It takes a few people who can hear it and who are already wired up that you look, and it's no theory. It's not something you have to study and adapt yourself to. It is not something that you have to finally decide, well, I'll take it on faith. He seems like such a forceful speaker at times, I'll just accept it. There's nothing to fucking accept. All you got to do is have the ability to get above the line, to get away from your partner and to look. And what you call you, that is you and everybody else, what you call you, that's it. The obvious is it. There is no unconscious mind in there. There is no smoldering flame to be uncovered. There is nothing to be revealed. You see it, and that's it. That operating at ordinary level of consciousness, what I am, everybody, is well within its rights to feel like, hey, I'm about to come apart. It is like a very fragile, almost transparent membrane. It is such, if I must remind you again, this quarter of this year, a fairly unsubstantial blow to the head, and you're yesterday's news. I don't mean physically. What seems to be you, this great whirlpool of contradictory and deep emotions, this great torrent, this double wind of diverse feelings, this thing of great unplumbed depth. Pow, and it's gone. And you can still walk around and comb your hair and smoke a cigarette and point to you'd like oatmeal instead of, toast. But this thing of all this great potential, wham. A deranged dentist doing root canal up here, cut up the wrong place, you're gone. You may live another 50 years, but this thing, this great potential that the gods was going to touch, this thing that prays at night, that cries in sorrow, that pleads for somebody to take away this veil and let me be my great metaphysical self. The guy's picking his nose with a screwdriver and somebody slaps him on the back and it's gone. Because we're down talking hard biochemical facts now. And ordinary consciousness can't deal with that, other than the laughter that you people so unaccountably respond with at times. That this thing that has such great potential, plugged into the great cosmic flow, just waiting to be totally revealed, waiting to be freed from these fetters that keep you bound into this mundane existence. And it can be gone like that, while the organism continues to function for many years and can get along with the IQ of 27 or an alderman, whichever comes first. Where did it go? Biochemically speaking, I know where it went. Biochemically speaking, even medicine, psychiatry can almost make some comment on it today. That's speaking in general, where life is talking through men. But individually, I mean, you laugh at this, which of course I contributed to some of it, but you laugh at it, the partner, line level consciousness, can't even chew on this. Oh yeah, sure, I mean, yeah, what you say I guess is true. And that's it. Consciousness can't even listen to it. There's nowhere to go with it. Once you see it, everything about this great depth, what a person I am. I mean, you see, if you don't stand there and make jokes, you don't know. You don't know the depths of suffering of which I am at oft-times subject. You don't know sometimes how I sit around and worry about the situation of the world peace, world hunger. You don't know how I worry about the way people treat each other. I know how badly I was treated as a child. You don't know. You never ask us. But you don't know how badly I was treated. You don't know how much I pray. You don't know how much I meditate on wanting to suddenly be awakened, to be relieved of this great burden. You know, I thought maybe you was going to do it for me. To strip away this thing, this crude, mundane thing that seems to be me, to reveal super person. There's nothing to be revealed. God, does anybody ever suspect, I fake it, of how tiring it is to put on this sham emotion to preach and to raise my voice about something that is a minimal point of intelligence? That if you can't see that, the rest of this has been all strictly show business. You have just found me to be an entertaining speaker, which shows how hard you are up for entertainment. If it sounds like at times I'm attempting to convince, if you don't ever see that, you haven't seen anything. Nothing. There's no doubt that you may have found some of this you thought interesting, informative, that made you think in different ways, that made you feel better, but you haven't seen a damn thing to still believe that I'm in some way a very deep, complex creature with a overloaded cornucopia of meaningful, oft-times hurtful experiences, dreams, fears, nightmares. And yet I know that there is this hidden jewel within me that if I could just pull away the sludge and the slime, there it would be. If you do not see on your own, if you cannot see that that is a grand facade, that there is, biochemically speaking, no basis whatsoever to that, then you have not seen anything. It's not a mystical experience. It's not taking my word for it. It's not taking it on some kind of faith. It is not, in truth, an all-life complex path. It's there. All you got to do is be able to pull yourself away from line-level consciousness. All you got to do is be able to pull yourself away from the inner voices. All you got to do is pull yourself away from the partner. I have described it to you and tricked you, attempted to trick you in a variety of manners. Through tasks, through my descriptions, through the jokes. And it's all right here. It's not me. It's not me waving my hands. It's not me making the jokes and giving the task. It's right here. Ordinary people are not wired up to see it. They never have been, even though it changes from generation to generation. It is most complex, and yet it is simplicity itself. And I describe it oftentimes, as I've been doing the last few minutes to get the laughs. It's simplicity. In essence, or in a way what it amounts to, for those that can do it, is you can read about religion, you can read about the unconscious, you can read about spirits, you can listen to me talk. Here it is, the simplicity of it. You can listen to it, whether it took you 5 minutes or 5 years, and listen to it and think, hey, I know what I'll do. I'll just look in here and see if what he says is true or what I read is true. And you look, and it might take, I don't know, 15, 20 seconds. You look, you think, well, shit, it's true. The thing I'm trying to look at with the thing that I think I'm using as the viewer, put them all together, and they spell the surface of water. They spell that upon which a mosquito can foxtrot. But to think I'm going to stick my finger, the mosquito's going to step through the water, you step through, and there's nothing there. There's the churnings of the brain. There's the whirlings of the liver. There's the noise of the nervous system going on. They can plug you up to the machine and read it. But this thing that there is a huge cavern of experiences, dreams, fears, contradictory desires, and above all, a self that is yet to be able to reveal itself. All you got to do is look, and it's a joke for a few people. There's no contradictory desires down there. There's no great hurts and fears. And above all, there's no possibility there's nothing down there better. There's nothing worse. That's it. And it's noise. It's molecular activity. God, what a disappointment. Said those attracted in the heat of metaphysical fervor at one time. Maybe I should appoint myself cardinal in charge of the murder of fervor. To conclude this paragraph, to point out the obvious to a few people, to all of you if you're listening and feeling any of it. Nay, nay, as opposed to the feeling that something is going to be revealed. When something happens to people throughout history, 5,000 years ago or today, it is some kind of process of revealing this new person, this new mind, this new consciousness. The new, what this is all about for the few people, the new is a something. It is not a passive state that a revelation came upon me. I was passively there, and although I'd been praying and suffering, of course, but that the revelation came upon me, and my new person, my new mind, my new consciousness. What this is, it has to be through an active, willful production of one's new self. The last obvious thing, I will conclude the paragraph, should have gone unstated over the last few minutes. The feeling that this process of revealing a new me, that it occurs, is true. That those involved, it is true as far as they're concerned. It's not folly, it's not stupidity, it's not an illusion. That is the history of the religious or the spiritual progress of humanity, from those that apparently were plugged into the supernatural outside the system to those that apparently were just given prophetic powers. They were just, the truth was revealed by them to the gods. It is true enough. It has served a purpose. And to them, it did seem to be, they're not lying, they're not holding anything back. It was as though I'd been praying, I'd been suffering, I'd been fasting, I'd been listening to my old Loving Spoonfuls album, and suddenly it was like heat came over me, and I felt faint, and I lay down for a few minutes, and it hit me. They're not lying. That is exactly the way it apparently occurred. Or if you're getting good enough, that is the way it occurred. But you can't do it with this. You weren't wired up. You weren't dragged into this for that. That it is not a process of something being revealed. It is because there's nothing there. For those working at in this little corner of life's factory, there is nothing there. There was nothing there in those other people that believe that. Remember, they didn't just believe it. If you can understand it, it did happen. But now you got to understand it didn't happen. There was no new something to be revealed. All you got to do is look in you. Learn how to look the right way. You can just look. And damn if I wasn't right. And I was right about Moses, Buddha, anybody you ever heard of. It was the same thing. But it did occur, right? You follow me? But with you, it can't be done. All you got to do is look and realize that there is nothing there to be revealed. You can come listen to me talk forever. I can write some more books and you can read them. You can take all these tapes home and listen to them faithfully and wait for it to be revealed. A new me. You almost got it pictured, what it would be. You've taken all I've said, mixed it in with your imagination, everything your partner had to contribute, that irascible son of a gun, and you almost know what this new you will be. And if I can just hold on, if I just wait, if I just faithfully attend, and if I try to think good thoughts and not eat red meat, it'll happen. Not to you. It is something that you have got to produce. And in a sense, you've got to produce it from nothing. It is not waiting back there to be revealed, just suddenly you strip off the veneer, there's nothing there. You're producing it. That almost makes me want to wax poetically and say, I am acting as a generalized sperm. I am, in a sense, impregnating or attempting to everybody. But it's not something just waiting to be revealed. Whatever it is you have when you down on this level, of course, those of you that have anything, you'll have some understanding of what I'm saying, whether you like my words at the time. It is something that you have produced, that you'll understand. I would have died and never had this. I could have read books until my eyes dropped out. I could have listened to people talk until my eardrums wanted to retire. And what it is I understand now, in a sense, there is a new me. Not some kind of vague spiritual thing. I can feel it. There is biochemically another person. I am not what I was. I am not what I was born as, and I am not what I would have died as. Now, I'm not going to give any further descriptions about, well, now I can walk on water, and used to I could only walk on glass. It's not that. I am not the person that life meant me to be. Not even speaking better or worse. Biochemically, I'm not. But it was not revealed. It was not something that was in me at any time in my life. It would have never been there. It was not something, through great works, through great faith, through meeting a great person like moi, that it was revealed in me. There was nothing back there. Whatever it is I got, I created this son of a bitch. As much as any one person can take credit for anything, remember. It was my efforts. I willfully, I purposefully did this. Although I do know that most of you still don't know what you're doing. So don't worry about that. Don't sit there and let your partner argue with me. Well, wait a minute, you can't tell me I'm willfully doing it because I'm not sure where it's going. I know. You're still willfully doing it. You're making it. You're creating it, not in some way assisting in a revelation. There's nothing to be revealed. There's nothing being hidden in you. Evil spirits, the sins of your father, the insanity of humanity, none of that in some way is covering up this great sparkling potential gem in you. And if you don't see that, you don't see anything. You're still a sitting duck. You're still going to die, and life's going to forget your name like the phone number of an ugly woman. You'll be gone like that, and you'll know it. I'm not going to tell you when, but you'll know it. And when you know it, it's going to be at a real acute time. Let me put it to you that way. When it strikes you and everybody else, it's going to be, damn. There's nothing to be revealed. There's nothing to wait on. Whatever it is you get, it's going to be involved with this. You know, forget giving me credit. Forget looking for any guides, and of course you can't say that you actually did it, because we're all inside something alive. So it's not something that you just conjured up, that you, not only did you construct a new statue within you that's now you, and don't fall into that, then it's, all right, where'd you get the clay? Where'd you get the water? Where'd you learn how to do it? But as opposed to it being some kind of revelation, that there was a me in me that finally got uncovered in all this glory, as opposed to that, no, it was an active, willful act of you creating this. There is nothing to be revealed in anybody that's ever attracted to this. If you're waiting on it, in that sense, you'll make Godot, look like the life of the party. He got there too early. You're waiting on that. Need I say more? You're waiting on a train that doesn't even have a track. But I've not made a good preacher. I don't know how I get wound up. Except talking to ordinary people. Then I wouldn't even do it, would I? I don't know. In fact, I find these kind of questions rather... That's known as a little mystical humor to relieve the tension at times. Sort of let people off the hook when it seems as though I'm getting too personal, like that. All right. I think I'll end this by asking you this. Is not a knot in a tie string, a drawstring, a delightful idea and invention? A nice pair of lounging pajamas, bottom half of a running suit, that all you got to do is get a general size and it has a drawstring. Fulfills, to me, and you should agree, you could agree for me, in a very splendid manner, a beautiful manner. It not only fulfills a purpose, it'll fit numerous sizes, going up to many inches and variations up and down, and still stay on. But then, think back in the history of you and humanity. Who finally, after the beautiful drawstring running through here, and it gets lost, is tie a knot. A knot. How long did it take them to think of that? But it is beautiful that now you can untie it, and some of your pants don't fall down. You can walk around, and you don't worry about that the drawstring is going to slip back in here, and it'll take me 2 hours with a coat hanger to get it out. All you do is tie a knot. If it came from any decent manufacturer, any decent, high-class store like Kmart, they're going to already have a knot tied in it. And nobody ever thinks about it. But notice this, in a sense, as beautiful as a drawstring is, were it not for the knot, it would fail its purpose, in a sense. It would continually, if you don't believe it, take the knot out. Take the knot out, and it will continually fail its purpose. Or if I may at least venture close to the wonderful land of pun, it begins to fall down on its duties. Its original purpose and function gets lost. That is, I believe I've covered it for you. That in a quite real sense, a drawstring would not be functioning at anything close to its proper level did it not have a knot in it. It would continually fail its duty. It would continually fall down on the job. It would continually get lost vis-a-vis its original purpose. Now let me ask you this. How is it that you might be able to tie a knot in yourself? I've got a little task in the next several weeks, let's say the next 3 weeks. I would sincerely, seriously like all of you to apply yourself to this. Go get yourself a copy, if you don't have one, of Machiavelli's book, The Prince. It's been eons since I looked into it, but my best recollection, you can open it up almost anywhere. And just sit around and read for a little while, 15 to 20 minutes. I guess you should go back and read. There'll probably be an introduction by a contemporary author of some kind. If you don't know the general purpose, Machiavelli, I guess, had an introduction himself, I don't remember, about what supposedly is the purpose of the book. Those of you who don't recall, it is supposedly a suggested manual to a prince. There's a ruler of a principality back then, which amounts to a king, a dictator, head honcho. The suggested Bible of how to operate a kingdom, how to rule people, how to get along with adversaries, how to get along with allies. If you've never read it, I suggest you, I'm asking you, go out and spend $2 or $3, grab yourself a paperback version, and read some of it. Then, if it strikes you at all why I might have suggested you read it, as I assume you know by now, I'm not hinting anything about, what's his name? Or if Mickey, what is it? I'm not hinting to you that he knew something, that he was a secret mystical person. Forget all that. It's got nothing to do with that. But I just give you something else to do that apparently came from life, that life talked to somebody, and it's apparently written for one purpose. But if you read it and suspect anything about why I might have recommended that you pick up a piece of it and read it, then the rest of the task is knock out a little version of your own The Prince. Oh, might I add, perhaps keeping in mind your partner and his relatives as your kingdom.